My parents went bankrupt after paying for my brother's college. Now they want me to support them and... Hey everyone. Dexter, 27M. My family situation has spiraled out of control, and I don't know what to do anymore. Let me give you some context. My older brother, Logan, 29M, has always been the favorite. Growing up, my parents, Diane and Rich, poured their hearts, time, and money into him. He was the athletic one, the popular one, the one they always bragged about. Me? I was the quieter kid. I loved books and building things. My parents never ignored me outright, but Logan was always the star. When it came time for college, Logan had his heart set on an elite private school. You know the kind. Ivy-covered buildings, ridiculous tuition, the whole 9 yards. My parents didn't even hesitate. They sold stock, took out a second mortgage, and practically drained their savings to pay for it. I remember hearing them talk late at night about how tight things were getting, but they always brushed it off with, "It's for Logan's future." Fast forward a couple of years. Logan graduated with a degree in business, but didn't exactly set the world on fire. He bounced between a few jobs before deciding he wanted to find himself in California. My parents were thrilled for him. They handed him money for the move, co-signed an apartment lease, and even helped him buy a car. Meanwhile, I decided to take a different route. I went to a state school, worked part-time to cover my expenses, and graduated with no debt. I've got a decent job in tech now, not glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me stability. I thought I'd done everything right, but apparently that doesn't matter. A couple of weeks ago, my parents sat me down and dropped a bombshell. They're broke? Completely, utterly broke. Turns out, between Logan's tuition, his move to California, and their own mounting debts, they've been living paycheck to paycheck for years. And now, they're looking at me to help bail them out. I was stunned. I mean, I knew they were tight on money, but I had no idea it was this bad. They've racked up tens of thousands in credit card debt, their mortgage is underwater, and they're behind on car payments. My dad even hinted that they're considering filing for bankruptcy. At first, I felt terrible for them. I wanted to help, I really did. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. They chose to put all their eggs in Logan's basket. They chose to spend every last dime on him while I was over here eating ramen and clipping coupons. And now, they expect me to swoop in and save the day? I tried to bring this up with them, but they brushed it off. "We did what we thought was best for the family," my mom said. "Like that makes it okay." My dad chimed in with, "You're in a good position, Dexter. You can afford to help." Can I, though? I make decent money, but I'm not rolling in it. I have my own bills, my own goals. I was saving to buy a house in a couple of years, and now they're asking me to throw that all away to fix their mistakes? To make matters worse, Logan hasn't contributed a single cent. He's still living in California, working a mediocre job, and posting pictures of himself at brunch or on vacations. When I asked my parents about it, they said, "Logan's going through a rough time. We don't want to put more pressure on him." I feel like I'm losing my mind. How is it fair for me to sacrifice my future when Logan gets to live consequence-free? When I brought this up to my best friend, Mason, he said, "Dude, they're using you. You need to set boundaries." But every time I try, I just end up feeling like a terrible son. The thing is, I've always been the responsible one. Even as a kid, I'd clean up after Logan's messes, both literally and figuratively. He'd leave his crap everywhere, and I'd get yelled at for not helping out more. He'd blow off homework, and I'd be the one sitting at the dining table making sure he didn't fail his classes. It's always been like this. And now that we're adults, it's like nothing's changed. Logan makes messes, and I'm supposed to clean them up. My parents act like it's my duty, like this is what families do for each other. But doesn't that go both ways? The worst part is, I can't stop feeling guilty. My parents worked hard their whole lives, and I know they never expected things to turn out like this. My dad worked construction until his back gave out, and my mom ran a daycare out of our home. They're not bad people, they just made some bad choices. And I know they're scared about what's going to happen to them. But then I think about the way they handled things with Logan, and my guilt turns into anger. I mean, what did they think was going to happen? That Logan was going to magically land a 6-figure job and start paying them back? Did they even consider what it might do to me? I haven't told them no yet, but I haven't said yes either. Every time they bring it up, I make some excuse about needing more time to figure things out. But I can feel the walls closing in. My mom keeps calling me, leaving these voicemails that sound like she's on the verge of tears. My dad sent me a long email about how family sticks together in tough times. And Logan? He hasn't said a word. I actually tried reaching out to him the other day. I called him up and said, "Hey, do you know what's going on with Mom and Dad?" And you know what he said? Yeah, sucks for them. Anyway, did you see the game last night? Like, what? How can he be so casual about this? When I pushed him on it, he got defensive. What do you want me to do, Dexter? I'm not exactly rolling in cash here. And then he hit me with, besides, you're the one who's good with money. You're the responsible one. That last part stuck with me. I am the responsible one, aren't I? And that's the problem. Everyone expects me to take care of things because I always have. But I'm tired. I'm tired of being the safety net. I haven't told Mason everything yet, but I gave him the gist of it. He's been my best friend since college, and he's usually the voice of reason when I'm spiraling. When I told him what my parents are asking of me, he just shook his head and said, "Man, you need to put yourself first for once. You're not their retirement plan." And he's right. I know he's right. But it's easier said than done, you know? To make matters even more complicated, there's Claire. She's my girlfriend of 3 years, and things have been getting serious. We've been talking about moving in together, maybe even getting engaged in the next year or two. But now I'm afraid this whole mess with my family is going to derail everything. Claire doesn't know the full extent of what's going on yet. I've been keeping it vague, saying things like, my parents are having money troubles, but I haven't told her how bad it really is. I'm scared she's going to think I'm just as reckless as them, or worse, that I'm going to let myself get sucked into their problems and drag her down with me. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, where do I draw the line? How do I help my parents without ruining my own life in the process? And what do I do about Logan? Should I call him out? Should I just let it go? I don't know. I feel like no matter what I do, someone's going to end up disappointed. I just wish I knew how to make this all go away. After that conversation with Logan, I couldn't shake the anger I felt. It was like I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. For years, I chalked up his selfishness to immaturity or just being clueless, but now I realized it was a choice. He wasn't clueless. He simply didn't care. He had no problem letting our parents ruin themselves for him, and now he was fine with me being the next scapegoat. The next few days were a blur of frustration and overthinking. My parents' calls kept coming, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't know what to say to them. How do you tell your own mom and dad that you don't want to help them? It felt cruel, even though I knew I wasn't the one who'd gotten them into this mess. I finally caved and called Mason to vent. Man, they're killing me, I said, pacing around my tiny apartment. I can't even focus at work. My dad emailed me a spreadsheet with all their expenses, like I'm supposed to just, I don't know, write them a check or something. What are we talking about here? Mason asked, how much do they actually need? That's the thing. It's not a one-time fix. They're asking for help with their mortgage, their credit cards, even their grocery bills. It's like they want me to take over everything. Mason let out a low whistle. That's insane. And Logan? He's still just sitting on his ass? Of course, I snapped. He's their precious baby. They'd never dream of asking him to give up his bottomless mimosas or whatever the hell he's doing out in California. Mason was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was trying to choose his words carefully. Look, man, you know I've got your back no matter what, but you've got to start setting boundaries. If you keep giving in, they're just going to bleed you dry. And I hate to say it, but Logan's never going to step up if you keep playing the responsible one. I know, I said, slumping onto my couch. I just don't know how to say no without feeling like I'm abandoning them. You're not abandoning them, Mason said firmly. You're protecting yourself. There's a difference. It sounded good in theory, but I still couldn't shake the guilt. The next morning, I forced myself to sit down and look at the spreadsheet my dad had sent me. It was worse than I'd thought. They were behind on everything: mortgage, car payments, credit cards, even the electric bill. The numbers didn't add up. Even if I gave them every spare penny I had, it wouldn't be enough to dig them out of this hole. And then what? Was I supposed to keep supporting them forever? As I stared at the screen, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. We really need to talk, Dexter. Please call me when you can. I didn't want to call her. I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. But then I thought about how she'd always been there for me when I was a kid. How she'd stay up late sewing costumes for my school plays or pack me extra snacks when I had a big test. It wasn't fair to blame her for everything, even if she had made some bad decisions. I took a deep breath and hit call. Dexter. She answered almost immediately, her voice filled with relief. I was starting to worry you were avoiding us. I've been busy with work, I said, which wasn't a complete lie. What's going on, Mom? She launched into a long explanation about their financial situation, most of which I already knew. But then she said something that stopped me cold. We're thinking of taking out a loan against Dad's life insurance, she said. It's not ideal, but we don't have many options left. Wait, what? I said, sitting up straight. That's insane. What if something happens to Dad? You'll have nothing left. I know it's risky, she said, her voice trembling. But what choice do we have? The bank is threatening to foreclose, and we're behind on everything. If we don't figure something out soon, we're going to lose the house. Why don't you ask Logan to help? I blurted out before I could stop myself. He's the one you spent all that money on. He should be the one helping you now. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Logan's going through a lot right now, she said finally. He's struggling to find his footing. Oh, come on, Mom, I said, my frustration boiling over. He's been finding his footing for years. Meanwhile, you're asking me to throw away my savings to clean up his mess. Dexter, that's not fair, she said sharply. Logan didn't ask for this, and neither did we. We're all trying our best to get through this, but we can't do it without your help. I wanted to scream. Instead, I muttered something about needing to think things over and hung up. That conversation haunted me for days. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying it in my head. I even started snapping at Claire, which only made me feel worse. Dexter, what's going on with you? She asked one night as we were eating dinner. You've been so distracted lately. It's my parents, I admitted, pushing my food around my plate. They're in trouble, and they want me to bail them out. Claire frowned. What kind of trouble? Money trouble. They're broke, and they're asking me to help with their bills. Okay, she said slowly. But isn't that something your brother should be helping with too? I laughed bitterly. Logan doesn't help with anything. He's too busy finding himself in California. Claire looked concerned but didn't say anything. After a long pause, she reached across the table and took my hand. I know this is hard, she said softly, but you have to think about what's best for you, too. You've worked so hard to get where you are, and you shouldn't have to throw it all away because of their mistakes. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I just don't know how to tell them no. The next day, I got another call from Logan. I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey, he said casually when I picked up. Mom told me you've been giving her a hard time about helping out. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Are you serious right now? I'm not the one who put them in this situation, Logan. Maybe if you actually helped out for once, they wouldn't be so desperate. Don't start with me, Dexter, he said, his tone defensive. I'm doing the best I can. Are you? I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're doing the bare minimum, while the rest of us pick up the slack. You don't understand what I've been dealing with, he said. It's not as easy as you think. Yeah, I'm sure brunch and yoga classes are really tough, I said sarcastically. Logan swore under his breath. You know what? Forget it. If you want to be a selfish asshole, that's on you. But don't act like you're some saint just because you've got a boring 9-to-5 job. And with that, he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding. For the first time, I realized just how deep the cracks in our family really went. I spent the night replaying Logan's words in my head, and the anger just wouldn't go away. A selfish asshole? Really? Was I selfish for wanting to protect my own future? Was it selfish to want him to take some responsibility for once in his life? The more I thought about it, the more I realized Logan wasn't just clueless. He'd been conditioned to think this way. My parents had spent his entire life shielding him from consequences, and now he thought the world owed him something. I wanted to just let it go and move on, but every time my phone buzzed, my stomach churned. It was always my mom or dad with a text, an email, or a voicemail asking if I'd made a decision. I couldn't keep ignoring them, and I knew sooner or later I'd have to face the storm. A few days later, my boss, Mr. Blake, called me into his office. I've worked at the same tech company since I graduated, and while it's not my dream job, I've been doing well enough to get noticed by upper management. I thought maybe it was another routine check-in, but when I walked in, he closed the door behind me, which he rarely ever does. Dexter, he started, motioning for me to sit. You've been doing some great work lately. We've been watching your progress, and I wanted to talk to you about an opportunity. I nodded, trying to focus despite my personal life bleeding into my brain. What kind of opportunity? There's a new leadership role opening up at our branch in Austin. It's a significant promotion, and I think you'd be a great fit. You've shown leadership potential, and this role could really set you up for bigger things down the road. Austin. I hadn't even been to Texas before. Would this mean moving? Yes, Mr. Blake said, leaning back in his chair. It's a big change, I know, but it's a fantastic opportunity. I'm giving you first dibs before we open it up to external candidates. Think about it and let me know by the end of the week. I thanked him and left the office, my mind spinning. The timing was insane. On one hand, this was the escape hatch I desperately needed. Moving to Austin would mean a fresh start, a way to put physical distance between myself and my family's problems. On the other hand, if I left now, it would feel like I was abandoning them completely. That night, I told Claire about the offer. Wow, she said, her eyes lighting up. That's amazing, Dexter. Are you going to take it? I don't know, I admitted. I mean, it's a great opportunity, but my parents… Claire frowned. Your parents will still have to figure things out whether you're here or in Austin. This could be a chance for you to focus on yourself for once. I know, I said, rubbing my temples. But I'd feel like I was running away. Claire sighed and put a hand on my arm. You're not running away. You're setting boundaries. There's a difference. It was the same thing Mason had said, but hearing it from Claire hit differently. She had a way of cutting through the noise and making me see things clearly, even when I didn't want to. The next day, I sat down with my dad. He'd been the more practical of the two growing up, so I thought maybe he'd understand where I was coming from. Dad, I started. I've been looking over the numbers, and I've got to be honest. This isn't something I can fix. Even if I drained my savings, it wouldn't be enough to cover everything. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he was holding something back. We're not asking you to fix everything, Dexter. We just need help staying afloat until we can figure things out. How long are we talking about? I asked. A few months? A year? 5 years? My dad sighed and looked down at his hands. I don't know, but you're doing well for yourself. If you can just help us get through this rough patch. Dad, this isn't a rough patch, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. This is years of bad decisions catching up to you. I'm sorry, but I can't be your safety net. I can't put my life on hold for something I didn't cause. His face hardened, and for the first time in my life, I saw anger there. You're turning your back on your family? I'm trying to take care of myself, I said, my voice rising. Why is that so hard to understand? Logan hasn't done a damn thing to help, and yet you're still coddling him like he's 16 years old. Why aren't you having this conversation with him? My dad's jaw tightened. Logan's going through a rough time. Stop saying that. I snapped. Everyone's going through a rough time. I'm going through a rough time, but I don't see anyone offering to help me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Finally, he shook his head and muttered, I thought you were better than this. I left before I said something I'd regret. That night, I got a call from Logan's girlfriend, Emily. She's sweet, but I've never been particularly close to her. We mostly interacted at family gatherings, where she'd sit quietly while Logan hogged the spotlight. Hey, Dexter, she said hesitantly. Do you have a minute? Sure, I said surprised. What's up? I don't know if I should even be telling you this, she began, but I feel like you deserve to know. Logan doesn't want me to say anything, but, well, things haven't been great between us lately. What do you mean? I asked, already dreading the answer. She hesitated, then said, Logan told me about your parents' situation. He said they were asking you for help, but he didn't mention that they'd already given him a ton of money while he was in school. That's not news, I said bitterly. They've been funding Logan's life for years. Emily hesitated again. No, I mean, he said they paid for his tuition. But that's not true, Dexter. He told me a while back that he took out loans for school. I frowned. What are you talking about? My parents told me they paid for everything. They didn't, she said quietly. Logan used the money for other things. Parties, trips, stuff like that. He barely touched his loans for tuition. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Are you saying he lied to them? I don't know if he lied outright, she said, but he definitely didn't tell them the whole truth. I thought you should know. I've been feeling really guilty about everything, and Logan won't listen to me. Maybe you can talk to him. After I hung up, I felt like my entire world had shifted. All this time, I'd assumed my parents had willingly drained their finances to pay for Logan's education, but now I wasn't so sure. Had Logan manipulated them? Lied to them? The next morning, I called my parents. My mom answered, sounding tired. Dexter, I don't want to fight with you. I'm not calling to fight, I said, but we need to talk about Logan. When I called my mom that morning, I could already hear the exhaustion in her voice. It was the kind of weariness that made me hesitate. Maybe it wasn't the right time to bring this up. But then again, when would it ever be the right time? Mom, we need to talk about Logan, I said, trying to keep my tone as neutral as possible. She sighed. Dexter, please don't start. Things are already hard enough right now. I'm not trying to make things harder, I said. But I need you to be honest with me. How much money did you actually spend on Logan's tuition? There was a pause, just long enough for me to know she was choosing her words carefully. You know how expensive his school was, Dexter. We had to pay a lot. Mom, I interrupted, my patience thinning. That's not what I'm asking. Did you pay for everything? Or did Logan take out loans? Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Dexter, she said finally, her voice trembling, why are you asking me this? Where is this coming from? Just answer the question, I said, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. Did Logan tell you he took out loans for school? Yes, she admitted softly, but he said it wasn't enough to cover everything. That's why we stepped in and helped. I clenched my fist, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Did you ever see any of the loan documents? Did you ever check how much he actually borrowed? There was another long pause. We trusted Logan, she said finally, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. Why are you bringing this up now, Dexter? What are you trying to say? I'm saying Logan didn't use his loans for tuition, I said bluntly. He used the money for other things. Parties, trips, who knows what else. And he let you and Dad foot the bill for the rest. That's not true, she said immediately. But her voice wavered, and I could tell she wasn't as certain as she wanted to sound. Logan wouldn't do something like that. Mom, I talked to Emily, I said. She told me everything. Logan admitted it to her. He's been lying to you. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it again. But then she said, I don't believe it. Why would he lie to us? Because you let him get away with it, I said, my voice hardening. You've spent your entire lives protecting him from consequences. Why wouldn't he take advantage of that? That's not fair, she said, her voice breaking. We've always done our best for both of you. No, you haven't, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. You've spent years bending over backward for Logan, while I've been left to figure things out on my own. And now you want me to clean up his mess. It's not fair, Mom. It's not fair to me. I could hear her sniffling on the other end of the line, and for a second, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the spreadsheet my dad had sent me, the constant calls, the way they'd brushed off my concerns about Logan time and time again. I was tired of feeling guilty, tired of being the one who had to carry the weight of their mistakes. I need you to talk to him, I said finally. He needs to take responsibility for this. You can't keep protecting him. After I hung up, I felt like I'd run a marathon. My chest was tight, my head was pounding, and I couldn't stop second-guessing myself. Had I been too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? But then I thought about the years of resentment that had been building up inside me, and I realized I'd just been holding back for too long. 2 days later, my dad called me. We talked to Logan, he said, his voice unusually serious. And? I asked. He admitted it, my dad said. He said he used the loan money for other things. Trips, clothes, going out with friends. He said he thought he'd have plenty of time to pay it back. But then things got out of hand. I let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. And what are you going to do about it? What do you want us to do, Dexter? My dad snapped. He's still our son. We can't just turn our backs on him. And what about me? I shot back. Am I not your son too? Or do I only matter when you need someone to bail you out? That's not fair, he said, echoing my mom's words from before. No, I said, my voice rising. What's not fair is you asking me to sacrifice my future because you can't admit that Logan screwed up. He's the one who put you in this position, not me. If you're going to keep enabling him, that's your choice. But don't expect me to go down with you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. But then he said, You've changed, Dexter. Yeah, I said. I have. And maybe it's time you did too. After that conversation, I stopped answering their calls. I needed space, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into changing my mind. Instead, I focused on work and tried to distract myself with the Austin job opportunity. I hadn't made a decision yet, but the idea of getting away from all the drama was becoming more and more appealing. Then, a week later, Logan called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Dexter, he said, sounding uncharacteristically subdued. We need to talk. About what? I said coldly. About everything, he said. Mom and Dad told me what you said. I know you're pissed at me, and I get it. But I want to explain. You've had years to explain, Logan, I said. Why now? Because I'm trying to fix things, he said. I know I screwed up. Okay? I thought I could handle it on my own, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to tell them. You didn't know how to tell them? I repeated, my anger flaring up again. So you just let them ruin themselves for you? Do you have any idea what you've done to them? To me? I'm trying to make it right, he said, his voice rising. I've been looking for a better job, and I'm going to start paying them back. I need time. Time, I said bitterly. You've had time, Logan. Years of it. Meanwhile, I've been over here working my ass off while you live in some fantasy world. I know, he said, sounding defeated. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to hang up on him, to tell him he was on his own. But another part of me, maybe the part that still remembered the way we used to be as kids, before everything got so complicated, wanted to believe he was sincere. I don't know if I can trust you, I said finally. Just give me a chance to prove it, he said. That's all I'm asking. I didn't make any promises, but I didn't hang up either. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected, hope. In the days following Logan's call, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Was he really trying to fix things? Or was this just another excuse, another empty promise he wouldn't follow through on? Part of me wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but after everything that had happened, it was hard to believe that he'd suddenly changed overnight. I decided not to tell my parents about the conversation right away. I wasn't ready to deal with the fallout if it turned out Logan was just stringing me along again. Instead, I threw myself into work and kept thinking about the Austin job offer. I'd been avoiding making a decision, but with every passing day, the idea of moving felt more and more like the clean slate I needed. Claire noticed the shift in me almost immediately. You've been quieter lately, she said one evening as we were watching a movie. Are you okay? I'm just thinking, I said. About everything. About the job, my family, Logan. She paused the movie and turned to face me. Have you made a decision about Austin yet? Not yet, I admitted. But I think I'm leaning toward taking it. Her expression softened, and she reached for my hand. I think that's a good idea, Dexter. You've been carrying so much weight for so long. Maybe this is your chance to start fresh. I don't want to leave you behind, I said, squeezing her hand. You're not leaving me behind, she said with a smile. We've talked about this, remember? If you move, we'll figure it out. I can come visit. We'll make it work. Hearing her say that eased some of the anxiety I'd been feeling, but there was still a knot in my chest that wouldn't go away. What if I'm making the wrong choice? I asked. What if moving makes everything worse? Claire tilted her head and gave me one of those looks that made me feel like she could see right through me. Dexter, the only thing worse than making the wrong choice is not making a choice at all. You've spent your whole life putting other people first. Maybe it's time to put yourself first for once. Her words stayed with me long after she'd left that night. The next day, I made up my mind. I walked into Mr. Blake's office during my lunch break and told him I wanted the Austin job. His face lit up, and he shook my hand enthusiastically. I knew you'd make the right call, Dexter. We'll start working on the paperwork right away. Congratulations. That evening, I called my parents to tell them the news. My mom answered, and I could hear the stress in her voice. Dexter, we've been meaning to call you. We've been trying to figure out a way to make things work without your help. Mom, I said, cutting her off gently. I've already made my decision. I'm moving to Austin. I got a promotion and I'm taking it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she said, You're moving? When? In a few weeks, I said. I know it's sudden, but this is something I need to do for myself. Your father isn't going to like this, she said, her voice tight. I'm sorry, I said, but I've made up my mind. I could hear her struggling to hold back tears. I just wish you'd stay. We need you, Dexter. You don't need me, I said firmly. You need to start holding Logan accountable. He's the one who put you in this position, not me. She didn't say anything after that, and I took the silence as my cue to hang up. A few days later, Logan called again. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Dexter, he said, his tone unusually serious. I just wanted to let you know that I talked to Mom and Dad. I told them I'm going to start paying them back. I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. How are you planning to do that? I've been looking for a better job, he said, and I've started selling some stuff. My car, some furniture. It's not much, but it's a start. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, it was a relief to hear him finally taking some responsibility. On the other hand, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just another empty promise. I know you don't trust me, Logan continued, and I don't blame you, but I'm trying to make things right. I don't want you to leave thinking I don't care. I hope you mean that, Logan, I said. Because if you screw this up again, I'm not going to be around to clean up the mess. I won't, he said quietly. I promise. A week later, I started packing up my apartment. Claire came over to help, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Moving to Austin wasn't going to fix everything, but it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking control of my life instead of letting my family dictate it. The night before I left, I got one last call from my mom. She sounded calmer than she had in months. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, she said. Even if I don't always show it, I want you to know that. Thanks, Mom, I said, my throat tightening. I hope you and Dad can figure things out. We're working on it, she said. Logan's been stepping up. He sold his car and sent us some money. It's not much, but it's a start. That's good, I said, surprised but relieved. I hope he keeps it up. So do I, she said. Take care of yourself, Dexter. You deserve to be happy. The next morning, I loaded up my car and hit the road. As I drove away, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, hope, and fear. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving towards something better. 2 months later, I was settling into my new life in Austin. The job was challenging, but I loved it. Claire came to visit every few weeks, and we were already talking about her moving down permanently. I kept in touch with my parents, but I kept my boundaries firm. Logan called occasionally, and while I was still cautious, it seemed like he was finally starting to grow up. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now, that was all I needed.